Jason Boak had argued with his on-and-off girlfriend many times before, but this time, the fight didn't end with a quick apology or another temporary reconciliation. In the early hours of August 28, 2018, Boak had been outside a bar in Dundee, Florida, watching his estranged girlfriend, Jessica Mozzarella, after the two had been arguing through text messages. Inside the bar, another woman, Jasmine Measle, had become too intoxicated to safely get home, and Jessica helped her into an Uber. But from where Jason was watching, he believed Jessica was the one getting into the car. That misunderstanding turned a private argument into something far more dangerous. Already angry and jealous, Jason texted Jessica and threatened to go after the Uber driver. Then, instead of letting the car leave, he followed it in a pickup truck. Behind the wheel of that Uber was 38-year-old Robert Westlake, a driver with a concealed carry permit and police academy training. But he had no idea that the vehicle behind him was connected to a fight he had nothing to do with. Jason began tailgating the Uber, closing the distance until he finally swerved in front of it and slammed on his brakes, forcing Westlake to stop. Then Jason got out and walked toward the car, holding something in his hand and acting as if he had a weapon. At that moment, Westlake had only seconds to decide what was happening. He had a passenger in the car, he had been forced off the road, and the man coming toward him had already threatened violence. Westlake drew his firearm and fired one shot.
I say something? You want a pistol? You want me to shoot you? Oh my God. Oh my God. I just shoot you.
Only afterward did he realize the object Jason had been holding wasn't a gun, it was a cell phone. Westlake immediately called 911 and tried to help, performing CPR and applying pressure until emergency responders arrived. But Jason Boak died at the scene. After reviewing the dashcam footage, text messages, and the moments leading up to the shooting, authorities ruled that Westlake had acted in self-defense under Florida's Stand Your Ground law. He was not charged, but the case didn't end cleanly for him either. Because Uber's policy prohibits drivers from carrying firearms while using the app, Westlake was later suspended from the platform. In the end, the entire tragedy came down to a chain of bad assumptions. Jason believed his girlfriend was in the car. Westlake believed Jason had a gun, and within seconds, a jealous argument became a fatal confrontation on the side of the road. If you thought this was bad, the next story shows just how quickly things can become even worse. In May 2021, Michael Shackelford was driving through San Antonio when he noticed something that immediately felt wrong. A gray Ford Fusion passed by with one of its rear doors open, and at first, it could have looked like a simple car issue. But then he saw the woman inside. She was leaning toward the open doorway, waving, screaming, and clearly trying to get someone's attention. Michael later said the look in her eyes made it obvious she needed help. Instead of continuing on, he turned around, began following the car, and called 911. Reports say he followed the vehicle for nearly 5 miles, all while recording and updating the dispatcher in real time.
Hi, I need police ASAP. I'm on 410 South by Ingram Park Mall. A lady is screaming outside her Ford, a gray Ford exiting Ingram Road right now. She's trying to get out of a vehicle and the guy won't let. No, she's not exiting. They got back on 410.
This is where the footage makes the situation impossible to dismiss. The open door is no longer just something strange on the road. The woman can be seen desperately trying to signal for help, while the car keeps moving through traffic. From Michael's point of view, it looked like she was trapped inside a vehicle she was actively trying to escape from. As he continued following, the driver kept moving, and the woman remained near the open doorway, with almost no safe way out. Every second made the situation more dangerous. If Michael lost sight of the car, he might also lose the only chance to show police exactly what was happening. So he stayed behind them, close enough to keep the vehicle in view, but far enough to avoid making the situation even more unpredictable.
She jumped out! 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 Ma'am, get in my truck! Get in my truck!
Then the car finally slowed, and the woman made her move. She pushed herself out of the open door and jumped from the moving vehicle, tumbling onto the roadside. Michael stopped immediately and called out for her to get into his truck. She was shaken, but still able to move, and ran toward him.
There's a cop! There's a cop right there in front of me!
Turn around, it's a Ford Fusion Gray.
Okay, there's a cop in front of us at 410 in Calabria, our Military Drive.
By this point, the escape had already happened, and Michael was no longer just a witness. He was protecting her until help arrived. He flagged down a passing officer and stayed with the woman while they waited for EMS. She was later taken to a hospital, and reports described the incident as an apparent domestic violence situation. What makes the footage so disturbing is how public it all was. This was not hidden away somewhere behind closed doors. It was happening in traffic, in front of other drivers, while one woman tried to make anyone understand that she was in danger. And if Michael had not turned around, followed the car, and stayed on the phone with 911, the outcome could have been far worse. Now in the next case, the danger was hidden in something that looked completely calm. Over on the YouTube channel Sidestep Adventures into History, Dan and Robert travel across the southeastern United States, documenting forgotten places before they disappear completely. Their videos often focus on old homes, abandoned buildings, and locations with history slowly being swallowed by nature. During one expedition, they visited an isolated home deep in the woods known as the Willis Place. From the outside, it had the look of a place that had been left untouched for years. The structure was decaying, the rooms were mostly empty, and the silence inside made every small sound feel louder than it should. Dan and Robert explored the area carefully, looking through what remained of the old house and trying to piece together what life there may have once looked like. But the mood changed when they made the decision to crawl underneath the building.
So that's a 1958 Coke bottle, right? What is that? Oh, that's weird. Here. That is strange. You heard that, right, Dan?
Yes, I did.
That was weird. Alright, that's enough at this old house for a minute. We're gonna go look at something else.
Hello?
Sounded just like footsteps.
That's not funny.
No.
All right, you ready to go?
Yeah, I'm ready.
While they were below the floorboards, a series of heavy footsteps could suddenly be heard above them. The sound was clear, direct, and close enough to make both of them stop. It did not sound like a small animal moving around. It sounded heavier, like boots or footsteps crossing the wooden floor directly overhead. Being under a house is already uncomfortable, cramped, dark, and hard to escape from quickly. But hearing something walking above you when you believe the building is empty makes that space feel instantly dangerous.
That's a 1958 Coke bottle, right?
What is that?
The sound was enough to send them scrambling out from underneath the house. But when they cautiously checked inside, they found nothing. The rooms were empty. There were no obvious footprints, no animals, and no sign that anyone had just been moving around above them. That is what makes the moment so difficult to dismiss. The noise sounded too deliberate to ignore, but the house offered no explanation for it. To this day, Dan and Robert have no clear answer for what was walking above them at the Willis place. And now, we move to a case where the warning signs only became clear after it was too late. A group of climbers set out to reach the summit of Mont Blanc, but before they could continue higher, they had to cross one of the most feared sections on the normal Gutter route, the Grand Couloir. Climbers often call it the Death Gully, and the name is not just for effect. The crossing is short but brutally exposed. Above it, loose rock can break free without warning, and once it starts falling, the couloir turns into a natural funnel, sending stones and boulders straight through the path climbers have to cross. Between 1990 and 2017, the Gutter Couloir was linked to hundreds of rescue operations, more than 100 deaths, and over 200 injuries. That is why many climbers treat it as one of the most dangerous parts of the entire route. The summit of Mont Blanc may be the goal, but this short stretch can become the real test long before anyone reaches the top. To reduce the risk, the group crossed one at a time. That way, if rockfall started, only one person would be exposed instead of the entire team. Several climbers had already made it across safely, and for a brief moment, it seemed like the group might get through without incident. But as one climber moved across the gully, the mountain suddenly changed. A rockfall broke loose high above her. Within seconds, stones and boulders began crashing down the couloir at frightening speed. They bounced off the slope, shattered against the rock, and tore through the exact area she was trying to cross. There was no shelter nearby, no time to run, and no safe direction to escape. In that moment, standing upright could have been fatal. With only seconds to react, she dropped face down against the slope and pressed herself into the mountain. It was the only choice she had. For nearly 2 minutes, the rocks kept coming, slamming into the ground around her as she stayed completely exposed in the middle of the crossing. Some of the falling debris struck her, but she remained pinned down, knowing that moving too soon could put her directly into the next impact. When the rockfall finally slowed, the danger was not over. She was alive, but badly shaken. The force of the hits had left her disoriented and unable to stand properly. Each attempt to move showed just how vulnerable she still was. She was still in one of the most dangerous sections of the route, and she could not safely finish the crossing on her own. The group quickly realized they needed rescue. Continuing without help could have placed her and the others in even greater danger, especially if more rockfall came down. A helicopter was eventually dispatched, and rescuers managed to airlift her from the mountain. She survived and later recovered, but the footage shows exactly why the Grand Couloir has such a deadly reputation. It is not always the highest point of a mountain that creates the most danger. Sometimes, it is a narrow crossing that looks quiet for one moment, and then, without warning, becomes a place where the mountain itself starts falling apart. Now in the next case, the footage only becomes more disturbing once you know the full story. On the night of August 12, 2015, a driver approached the port of Tianjin in China, unaware that within seconds, the entire area would be torn apart. His dashcam was recording as the port sat in darkness ahead of him. Then, without warning, a massive explosion erupted from the Ruihai logistics warehouse area, lighting up the night sky and sending debris outward with terrifying force. But that first blast was only the beginning. Just 33 seconds later, a second and far more powerful explosion tore through the port. The fireball expanded across the area, swallowing buildings, vehicles, containers, and anything close to the blast zone. For the people nearby, there was no time to understand what was happening. One moment, it was an industrial fire. The next, it became one of the deadliest chemical disasters in modern Chinese history. The fires continued burning for days, triggering more explosions as hazardous materials kept reacting. Firefighters had rushed toward the original blaze without fully knowing what chemicals were stored there, and many of them were caught in the destruction when the larger explosion hit. By the time the disaster was finally under control, 173 people had died, including 104 firefighters, and hundreds more were injured. Investigators later found that the warehouse had been storing dangerous chemicals improperly and illegally, including large amounts of sodium cyanide and ammonium nitrate. The initial fire was linked to nitrocellulose that had become unstable after losing its wetting agent, allowing it to ignite. Once that fire spread through the storage area, it set off a chain reaction that the port was not prepared to contain. The aftermath exposed more than a storage failure. It revealed corruption, illegal approvals, and safety rules that had been ignored for years. In the end, 49 people, including company executives and government officials, were sentenced for their roles in the disaster. Yu Wei, the chairman of Ruihai Logistics, received a suspended death sentence. But for the families of those killed, the damage had already been done. The Tianjin explosion was not just a sudden accident caught on dashcam. It was a disaster built slowly, through ignored warnings, unsafe storage, and a system that allowed one warehouse to become a bomb waiting to go off. And from here, things only get darker. A woman named Lauren Combs lives in a house she believes is haunted, and starting in 2021, she began documenting strange activity that seemed to happen around her, often when she was home alone. At first, the incidents may have seemed small enough to question. A noise here, an object moving there, the kind of things people try to explain away because the alternative is too uncomfortable. But as the activity continued, Lauren started posting videos online, hoping someone might recognize what was happening or offer a logical explanation.
Luna, come on.
The strange events began happening more frequently, and with each clip, the feeling inside the house seemed to grow more oppressive. It was not just one isolated moment anymore. It was a pattern.
Chilling here, being a kitty cat.
Did you do that?
In one video, a bottle on the counter suddenly tips over, almost as if it has been pushed. Lauren does not touch it, and her cat does not appear to be close enough to knock it down. On its own, that might be easy to dismiss. But when you add it to everything else she had been experiencing, it becomes much harder to ignore.
To find out my final answer. Whoa, I'm not sorry. But I'm not sorry that I can't tell you something. 19 minutes, people. Just to be clear, 19 minutes until 6 o'clock. I share this. This brings a whole new level.
So I'm trying to be as calm as possible with all this stuff that is going on in my house. The books fell from that shelf. Thank you, Turtle. These are the books that fell, which is fine. Ignore my nails. I dyed someone's hair. This was one. The other. This one wouldn't be so bad if what was said on the TV as soon as the books fell. Right after.
But I'm not sorry that I can't tell you something. 19 minutes, people. Just to be clear, 19 minutes until 6 o'clock.
What the shit? Oh my god.
As time went on, the incidents became more frightening, and Lauren seemed increasingly convinced that whatever was in the house was becoming more direct. Then the activity appeared to turn physical.
Because my shirt is 6 and I have 1. I gave you 6 points. I'm
ridiculous. Don't make me think about numbers again. A brave and accurate decision. Yes, aye, Captain. Yes. Yeah, holy Captain, your horticulture is harvestable. Ah, good call, thank you. Fine. Hurry happily, and Hank, he's hungry. Hallelujah.
While Lauren was sitting on the couch, something seemed to tug at her hair from behind. She immediately turned around, expecting to see someone there, but there was nobody behind her. A few weeks later, while she was home with a friend, her dogs began acting strangely. They paced, whined, and kept staring toward the backyard, as if something outside had caught their attention. Lauren then remembered the camera she had installed near the tree line, so she pulled up the footage to see what the dogs had been reacting to.
Someone out there look. What the hell?
Out near the trees, a faint figure appears to move slowly back and forth. It does not look fully solid, almost blending into the darkness while still being visible enough to unsettle anyone watching. When Lauren saw it, she broke down in tears. For her, this was not just another unexplained object or strange sound inside the house. It felt like she was finally seeing the presence she believed had been haunting her. Whether it was a trick of light, a person, or something else entirely, the footage left Lauren with the feeling that whatever had been inside her home may have also been watching from outside. And now, we move to a place where one wrong moment left no chance to escape. On February 6, 2014, 5 Finnish cave divers entered the Plura cave system in northern Norway for what was supposed to be an extreme, but carefully planned, underwater traverse. These were not beginners. Patrick Grönqvist, Jari Huotarinen, Kai Kenkinen, Jari Usimaki, and Vesa Rantanen were experienced divers who understood how dangerous deep cave diving could be. Their plan was to begin at Plura, swim through the flooded cave system, and eventually exit through Steinugelflaget, deep inside the mountain. But Plura was not the kind of place where experience removed the danger. The water was barely above freezing, the passages were narrow, and the route dropped to around 132 meters below the surface, where every small problem became harder to solve. The team split into 2 groups. Patrick and Jari Huotarinen entered first, while the other 3 waited behind so the disturbed silt could settle and visibility would improve. At first, everything seemed under control. They cut through the thick ice, descended into the dark water, and followed the route through the cave. But about an hour into the dive, deep inside the system, Patrick realized Hari was no longer behind him. When he turned back, he found him stuck in one of the narrowest sections of the passage. In cave diving, that is one of the worst things that can happen. There is no direct path to the surface, no room to move freely, and at that depth, panic can become deadly fast. Patrick tried to help him get loose, but the situation quickly deteriorated. Stress made breathing harder, and at extreme depth, rapid breathing can cause carbon dioxide to build up, making panic even worse. Patrick fought to save him, but after several desperate minutes, Jari Huotarinen died inside the cave. Patrick was then forced into an impossible decision. If he stayed too long, he could die as well. But leaving meant abandoning his friend in the darkness. His dive computer was already showing a massive decompression obligation, meaning he could not simply swim up and escape. He had spent too much time too deep. With no way to warn the second team behind him, Patrick continued toward the exit. knowing they would soon reach the same narrow passage. When the second group arrived, the dive turned even more dangerous. Vesa Rantanen was the first to encounter Jari's body. Shocked and under pressure, he had to squeeze past, losing valuable time and increasing the risk of decompression sickness. Then, Jari Usamaki reached the same area. Seeing his teammate dead inside the passage appears to have overwhelmed him. Kai Kenkinen tried to help, but Jari Usamaki also died during the dive. By then, the entire plan had collapsed. 2 divers were dead. Patrick and Vesa were fighting the effects of a dangerous ascent, and Kai was still inside the system, forced to find his way out while believing he might be the only survivor left. What had been planned as a controlled 5-hour dive became a nightmare that stretched for hours. Patrick spent around 7 hours underwater. Kai finally surfaced after roughly 11 hours in the cave. 3 of the 5 divers survived, but the accident left 2 men deep inside Plura. Norwegian authorities closed the cave and brought in expert recovery divers, but the official operation was eventually called off because the risk was considered too high. For the surviving divers and their community, that decision was almost impossible to accept. They believed no one should be left behind. Weeks later, a larger Finnish recovery team returned without official permission. This was not a reckless dive. They planned it carefully, staged equipment, used support divers, and documented the operation with helmet cameras. Over several days, they recovered both bodies from the cave and brought them out. Afterward, they reported what they had done to Norwegian police. Despite the illegal re-entry, authorities chose not to press charges. The Plura tragedy remains one of the most haunting cave diving disasters because it wasn't caused by inexperience or carelessness alone. These were skilled divers who entered with a plan, training, and equipment. But inside that cave, the margin for error was almost non-existent. One diver became trapped, and from that moment, every person behind him was pulled into the same chain of danger. And this next moment is a reminder that nature does not always give a warning before it strikes. On July 3, 2022, hikers and climbers were moving across the Marmolada Glacier in the Italian Dolomites, enjoying what seemed like a perfect summer day in the mountains. The sky was clear, the views were wide open, and nothing about the scene gave an obvious warning that the glacier above them was close to failing. But high on the mountain, the ice had already been weakened by days of extreme heat. Temperatures near the summit had reached around 10 degrees Celsius, and with little protective snow left on the surface, the glacier was exposed directly to the sun. At around 1:45 p.m., a massive serac broke away near Punta Rocca. In seconds, an enormous section of ice, snow, and rock began tearing down the northern slope. The collapse released enough energy to be compared to a small seismic event, and the avalanche traveled more than 2 kilometers down the mountain, directly across a route used by climbers heading toward the summit. For the people below, there was almost no time to react. One moment, the mountain looked calm. The next, a wall of ice and debris was coming down with terrifying speed. Rescue teams rushed to the area using helicopters, drones, and search dogs, but the conditions were dangerous, and officials feared more ice could still break loose. By the next day, several people had already been confirmed dead, with others still missing. In the end, 11 people lost their lives, and 8 others were injured. The Marmolada Glacier collapse became one of the deadliest ice avalanches recorded in the Alps in decades. And what made it even more unsettling was how normal the day had looked just moments before. A bright summer afternoon on a famous mountain, hiding a collapse that no one below could stop. And that takes us to the next story, where the real horror is how quickly control disappeared. 19-year-old Raymond Cabalfin Jr. had gone to the Lake Clementine Trail near Auburn, California, with a group of friends, and from the outside, there was nothing about that afternoon that looked unusual. It was the kind of day that seemed harmless at first. Young people hiking, laughing, recording each other, and trying to cool off near the American River. But the danger in that water was not obvious from the surface. The river looked open and calm enough to jump into, but underneath that ordinary-looking scene was a current strengthened by heavy seasonal flow, the kind of current that can turn a few seconds of fun into something impossible to control. Raymond stood on the rocks with his shirt off, preparing to enter the water, while one of his friends filmed the moment like it was just another memory from the trip. Almost at the same time, he and another friend jumped in. The other swimmer managed to make it back to the rocks, but Raymond did not. At first, that difference did not fully register with the group. He was still above water. He was still moving. And because everything had started with laughter, some of his friends believed he was joking around or struggling in a way that was not yet serious. That misunderstanding is what makes the footage so difficult to process, because in the beginning, nobody seems to understand that the mood has already changed. Raymond began drifting away from the area where he had entered, and once the current took hold, the distance between him and the rocks grew quickly. The river was carrying him faster than anyone on shore could react. By the time his friends realized he was no longer in control, he was already being pulled downstream, fighting against water that was far stronger than it looked. They called for help and tried to follow him along the bank, but the landscape made that almost impossible. The current moved in a straight, relentless direction, while the people on land had to deal with rocks, uneven ground, and the shock of realizing that something they had just been laughing at had become an emergency. Within moments, Raymond vanished from their sight. Park rangers, rescue divers, and search crews began combing the river and the surrounding area, but the conditions were extremely difficult. The American River was moving fast, and officials warned that water like that could become deadly within seconds, even for someone young, healthy, and capable. After hours of searching with no sign of him, the operation had to be paused, leaving his family and friends in the worst possible position, knowing where he had disappeared, but not knowing when or if he would be found. Days later, a body was discovered in the American River near the Roby Point hiking area. The Placer County Sheriff's Office identified it as Raymond Cabalfin Jr. The same river that had looked like a place to cool off had carried him away, turning an ordinary afternoon with friends into a reminder of how quickly moving water can erase every chance to react. That's all for today, folks. If you'd like to see more of this creepy content, click on the video on screen.